The day my parents' will was read, I thought I might just faint. My younger brother, Marcus, swaggered out with our parents' $800,000 mansion in New York, and I got stuck with a broken-down cabin in Alaska. Talk about sibling rivalry. To add insult to injury, that very night, my fiancé tossed my ring across the table, calling me a pathetic loser. As the door slammed behind him, I spiraled into despair. Was he right? Was this how my story was going to end? Meet me, Sophia Hale, the girl who learned to be invisible. In our family, love was a competition, and guess who was in the spotlight? From the moment Marcus could walk, he dazzled everyone with his charisma and athleticism. It was like I was stuck in the back row, blending into the wallpaper, knowing my highlight reel would never air. Even when I brought home an exceptional essay, it barely registered. Dad's eyes lit up only for Marcus's next basketball game, while Mom's squeeze on my hand felt like a consolation prize. Fast forward to my 20s, where I built a predictable life in New York data analysis, late hours, and an audience of none. I had mastered the art of being reliable and thought that was good enough. Daniel came along, saying he admired my grounded nature, but over time, his praise morphed into comparisons. "Why don't you dress sharper?" he'd say as he eyed Marcus's Instagram, twisting the knife just ever so lightly. I brushed it off like the good little peacemaker I was trained to be, unaware that love can sometimes be a slow erosion of self-worth. Reality struck like a lightning bolt during the will reading. Stepping into that attorney's office, I clung to a sliver of hope. Maybe my parents had noticed me as more than just the supporting character in Marcus's life story. But when he sauntered in, confidence radiating from him, I sensed the plot twist was already decided. He strutted away with 4 gleaming bedrooms and a sunlit sanctuary while I was handed a ramshackle cabin that even the attorney briefly hesitated to present. As Marcus grinned, I felt the world tilt beneath my feet. Suddenly, there was a rumbling in my chest. I began to question everything I had ever thought about love, family, and who I was meant to be. Maybe it was time to stop disappearing and to finally write my narrative on my own terms. No more lurking in the shadows, it was time for Sophia Hale to step into the spotlight, whatever that might mean. A cabin in Alaska? Sounds like a wild adventure waiting to unfold. I think it's the perfect place to discover who I am without distractions, just a bit of nature, maybe a bear or two, and a ton of space to breathe. I could transform that cabin into a sanctuary, or better yet, a fortress. I envisioned warm fires, cozy evenings with hot cocoa, and my newfound independence wrapped around me like a thick, fuzzy blanket. Who knew that the loser could flip the script? With imagination and determination as my sidekicks, I can shake off this loser label. Maybe Alaska is exactly what I need, a challenge that echoes my life's journey thus far. As I stand at the threshold of this broken cabin, I'm filled with a crazy mix of excitement and, dare I say, hope. I'll show Marcus, and maybe even Daniel, that there's more to my story than they ever considered. The tales that truly matter come from within, and it's high time that Sophia Hale writes hers loud and proud. As I stepped into our apartment, the tension in the air was so thick you could have sliced it with a knife. Daniel was in the kitchen, arms crossed and jaw set like he had been rehearsing for the role of a lifetime. His eyes lit up in a fiery rage as he grabbed my attention, and before I could even find my bag, he spat out the news from Marcus. Apparently, my brother had hit the jackpot with a mansion, while I was stuck with a shack in the middle of nowhere. I tried to defend my new digs, insisting it was a cabin, but even I couldn't convince myself. The words trembled out, and Daniel laughed in response, a harsh, jagged sound that echoed around us like breaking glass. A cabin. Sophia, do you hear yourself? His pacing mirrored his frustration, as he expressed the irritation of carrying the weight of our dreams on his back while I simultaneously dragged us backward. My words stumbled to escape, crushed beneath the volume of his outbursts. You know what Marcus said? Daniel shot back, and my heart dropped. Your parents were practical. They knew who the real investment was. His casual delivery was worse than a slap in the face. Memories flooded my mind, sitting alone in bleachers, pretending I wasn't hurt when my birthday was overlooked, and relatives always nodding approvingly as they labeled me the sensible one. The forgettable one, really. My heart crumpled under the weight of it all. "Wake up," he demanded, his voice lowering to a hiss. "You'll never amount to anything living like this." Each word was a jab, but the one that landed hardest was settling. It was the perfect description of my life. Settling to keep others happy instead of making noise. Settling for the shadows because it felt easier than claiming my worth. As Daniel closed the distance, frustration radiated off him like a heat wave. Did he even realize how much those words stung? A part of me crumbled under his relentless accusations. "Do you think I want to marry someone who brings nothing to the table? Someone who's always second place?" It felt like a fracture inside me, something that split open quietly. "That's not fair," I whispered, my voice barely a thread amidst his tirade. He scoffed again, the sound sharp and cruel. "Fairness? I was almost 30, he said, with nothing to show for it, no savings, ambitions, or future. What hurt most was the realization that he had probably believed this for a long time. As I absorbed his words, the room strangled me. It felt smaller, the air unbearable. My heartbeat drowned out our argument, echoing louder than his accusations. For a fleeting moment, I considered defending my choices, the late nights, sacrifices, and how I'd held us together during his lows. But deep down, I knew it wouldn't matter. People like Daniel only valued what they could measure, and I didn't have the trophies or the life he deemed worthy. Finally, he snatched his coat, his movements terse and final, like every word had driven another nail into our shared coffin. "I'm not signing up for this," he declared, his voice laced with certainty. I watched him leave, the door closing with a resounding finality. I was left standing there, feeling like nothing, just a ghost in my own life, while he walked away, unburdened by the weight of my reality. Not when your own parents didn't think you were worth more than a broken cabin. Daniel's parting shot hung in the air like stale popcorn, and with a slam of the door, the silence that followed was deafening. I remained frozen on the kitchen floor, soaking in the gloom of unwanted truth. The ring he'd pitched away lingered near the chair's leg, glinting faintly in the dim light, a shiny reminder of pain. I couldn't even pick it up, my hands feeling weighted with the heaviness of the reality he'd just thrust at me. The echoes of his insults replayed in my mind: pathetic loser, no future, looping incessantly like a bad remix, always at the forefront of the album that was my life. Each cruel phrase thudded in my chest, heavier than the last, like stones finding their resting place at the bottom of my heart. Ironically, it wasn't just him saying those things. It felt as if an entire chorus of voices had joined in over the years. I curled in on myself, forehead pressed against my knees, weeping openly for the first time in ages. This wasn't a subtle release, but rather a cathartic deluge, years of repressed emotions struggling for air. As tears streaked down my cheeks, the chill in the apartment wrapped tighter around me, making the place feel like an icy tomb. Eventually, the flood subsided. I grabbed a towel, patting my face dry, as if attempting to scrub away the remnants of someone who I realized no longer existed. Staring at the reflection in the microwave, I looked hollow but not entirely broken. It felt as though a shift had occurred within me, not spurred by anger but rather desperation. I had hit rock bottom, and there was nowhere left to go but up. With a newfound resolve, I wandered into the bedroom and powered up my laptop, the screen flickering to life, Daniel's contact photo taunting me. For far too long, I'd bent and twisted myself to fit around that man's ideas, convinced that love required sacrifice. But the revelation struck like lightning: love shouldn't diminish you but uplift your spirit. If losing it meant gaining back a piece of myself, then it wasn't really a loss at all. In a moment of bravery, or perhaps insanity, I navigated away from his image and landed on a travel site, entering one bold destination, Alaska. The very thought felt ludicrous: initially a cabin in the remote wilderness, blanketed by snow. The more I stared at the screen, though, the notion transformed from laughable to liberating. I knew I couldn't mend what was broken in this stagnant, suffocating apartment. Staying here felt like slowly suffocating, and the need to escape loomed larger. If that dilapidated cabin was the extent of my parents' belief in me, then it was time to confront it head-on. The realization sparked a determination within. This wasn't about them but about reclaiming my narrative. With a surge of courage, I clicked to book a one-way ticket. No looking back. No more dwelling in places filled with shattered aspirations and hurtful memories. It was time to chase something real, something that would allow me to breathe again, even if it was in the icy embrace of the Alaskan wilderness. The next morning, I set off on a whirlwind adventure, stuffing a single suitcase with the essentials and leaving the ominous ring behind like a forgotten trinket. My flight was akin to a rickety roller coaster, small, deafening, and jolting through moody grey clouds. After what felt like an eternity, a driver in a beat-up truck whisked me down narrow, icy roads, the kind that seemed untouched by civilization. When he finally halted, he casually gestured toward an ominous stretch of dark trees, as if he were sending me off on a quest. I stepped bravely into the biting cold, the wind rudely slicing through my layers like a chef with a knife. As I trudged through the chilly air, I could barely make out the roof of my destination among the tangled branches. The cabin loomed before me like an old memory, crumbling and forgotten, perfectly mirroring my self-perception. With a heroic hand on the door, I felt the resistance. It was as stubborn as a toddler refusing to take a nap, swollen with years of neglect. Finally, the door groaned open, unleashing a frigid gust that slapped me in the face, and I was shot straight into the dark embrace of my inheritance. Inside, the cabin sagged under the weight of its own despair. The floorboards creaked, walls bowed like they just returned from a yoga retreat, and a broken window allowed stray snow to pirouette onto the rotting floorboards. There was a chair crumpled in the corner as if it had called it quits long before I'd arrived. My boots echoed in the silence, nudging the dust into a shimmering dance under the faint light. I wrapped my arms around myself tight, murmuring, "This is what I'm worth," but the void provided no comforting reply. It never did. Determined to reclaim some semblance of control, I began to clear away the remnants of disarray around the cabin. It felt instinctive, almost primal, as I shoveled debris aside, seeking order amidst the chaos. Just as I swept a particularly persuasive dust bunny away, the broom clinked against something solid beneath the tattered rug. With my heart racing, I hesitated. Should I? Could I? Maybe it was nothing. But curiosity nagged, urging me to conquer my fears. With a steady grip, I pulled the iron ring on the hatch, hearing the wood creak in resistance before reluctantly surrendering. The hatch groaned open, releasing a frigid waft of air from the unknown below. Mustering my bravery, I grabbed a flashlight, clicking it on and edging down the narrow staircase, which seemed intent on tattletelling my every step. My boots met packed earth at the bottom, and my breath caught as the beam of light danced across the dimly lit space. Crates piled high, heavy wooden boxes seemingly preserved by time's neglect, beckoned me deeper into intrigue. Nestled in a corner, a mysterious trunk stood sentinel, holding secrets of a bygone era. With trembling hands, I ventured toward the nearest crate, discovering a rusted metal shard that transformed into my trusty crowbar. With a delightful crack, the lid gave way, unveiling tightly wrapped bundles waiting for their moment of glory. As I unwrapped one, gold coins cascaded into my palm like sunshine trapped in metal, vibrant and impossibly heavy. My heart raced like it was in an Olympic sprint as I opened another bundle, revealing sparkling antique jewelry, stones radiating beauty under the flickering flashlight. Staggered by the visual feast of wealth surrounding me, I could hardly breathe, the cold air tingling in my throat like a frosty warning. It was staggering, an immense fortune tucked away in dusty boxes, a treasure trove worthy of fairy tales. In a daze, I whispered into the dimness, "What did you leave me?" Finally, my gaze landed on the old trunk. With hands shaking uncontrollably but irresistibly drawn, I lifted the lid, revealing brittle ledgers. My eyes widened at the discovery, ancient pages that chronicled payments, land rights, and resource claims, as if the past was about to relay its wild secrets. As I rifled through the old paperwork, my family name popped up like a magician's rabbit, with timber rights and mineral contracts larger than any tall tale Marcus had told. Underneath that mountain of yellowing pages, my heart did a somersault when I spotted an envelope. My name, in a familiar but faded scrawl, sent shivers down my spine. I was ready for an elderly relative's weathered secrets, but this was also the thing I dared not hope for: a message from Mom. With trembling fingers, the crackly paper began to reveal words etched in my mother's voice that filled the dank cellar. "Sophia, if you're reading this," I could almost hear her gently chiding me. It was a bittersweet moment, words reaching across the veil of time and space. My parents had always believed in me, seeing a strength that didn't need to thunder. I wasn't loud or boastful, yet here I was deeply caring about integrity and legacy, while Marcus just cared about showing off. Suddenly, I wasn't invisible. I was the star of my own show. As I pressed the letter to my chest, the tears dripped down, each one attempting to blur the ink but instead amplifying my revelation. All those sleepless nights filled with doubts and comparisons to Marcus faded away. They had entrusted me with something beyond money. This was all about responsibility and legacy, a powerful message wrapped in history. The gold coin I picked up felt divine in my palm, grounding me as a shaky chuckle bubbled out. The negativity that stuck around like gum on a shoe finally loosened its grip. A creak sounded from above, but instead of an ominous warning, it felt like the cabin was breathing with me, as if welcoming my newfound realization. Climbing those creaky stairs felt monumental, traversing from desolation to empowerment, letter clutched like a prized possession. The chill of winter nipped at my heels from the rickety window, but I stood tall in the center of that solemn cabin, letting all those years of self-doubt shatter around me. Daniel's nasty remarks and Marcus' better-than-you smirks washed over me, but, this time, they rolled right off my back. For the first time, my reaction wasn't dictated by their judgments. I felt a quiet, steady power beginning to blossom inside. Cataloging those treasures in the cellar over the next 2 days felt exhilarating, my notebook transforming into a treasure map revealing a treasure chest that could flip my future upside down. I discreetly reached out to experts under an alias, treating each whisper of confirmation like a soothing balm, reinforcing my rising confidence. Meanwhile, the boys were busy showcasing flash and fluff while I laid the groundwork for a legacy that was mine. Marcus' bragging calls were hit with the silent treatment, and Daniel's text was summarily deleted without a second thought. My focus was locked. I was charting my own course this time. I felt like a phoenix, rising from the ashes of my past, finally free from being someone's less than supportive background character. I was becoming the heroine of my own story, standing with my head held high as I left Alaska behind, my mother's words carefully tucked away like a talisman in my bag. The world outside was still filled with their glitz and glamour, but something fundamental had changed within me. They might continue chasing hollow appearances, reveling in their pretentious belief of superiority, but I had uncovered a truth much richer than their poignant facades. The cabin, cold and desolate, had transformed from a prison of pain into a sanctuary of newfound strength. If you ever find yourself unearthing buried truths from your own past, perhaps the question isn't just what would I do, but who would I become? Share your thoughts below, and be sure to subscribe so you don't miss the next tale of transformation.